Welcome to Diverse Talking Head Podcast. In the U.S., police reform has been and continue to be an issue of grave importance. Each year, we learn of multiple instances where unconstitutional law enforcement practices harm the lives of many people. But despite the need to reform law enforcement agencies in America, these efforts to do so often fall short. Tonight on Diverse Talking Heads podcast, we will discuss why they fall short and what can possibly be done to enforce it. Only on Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Welcome to Diverse Talking Head Podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and tonight our topic is one of urgency in this country. We're going to be discussing federal police reform. And here with me is our panel of diverse talking heads. We have Charlie. Welcome,
Calvin, thanks
Charlie.
for having me.
Quite my pleasure, Charlie. And we have Karen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we have Dan.
Good evening. Good to be back with all of you.
And for tonight's episode, we do have a special guest that's kind of sitting in the back in the studio, observing what's going on. But we're going to try to pull him in, draw him in, get his comments. Please welcome KG.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So let's get right to it. We know that a large part of the current need for police reform was brought to the surface during 2020 and the murder of George Floyd. People protested. There was riots going on. But it wasn't just Black people that were protesting. It was our allies. They got involved, and it was a worldwide movement, or so it seemed. And now it has kind of died down, only to rise to the surface again when another incident of police killing, especially an unarmed person, in most cases, a Black man, happens again. So tonight we're going to talk about police reform. Guys, I'm going to put a question out there, and anyone that wants to take it, please answer. Is there something that can happen called true police reform in this country? Your thoughts? Now, you know me. If you don't say something, I'm going to ask the question directly. Dan.
Okay. It's difficult in the current political climate. People, I think what you have is a clash of ideas, people wanting to be safe, and they kind of get a knee-jerk reaction and say, well, that means we need more policing. And you have other folks who are pointing out the fact that perhaps we should look at the causes of why we have some of these problems And we have found over the last few years that just adding more training doesn't solve the problem. And our current political climate makes it difficult to have this discussion. And unfortunately, I'm at the point now where I think it's going to take a lot longer than it should have in order to find some reform.
Okay, fair enough. Now you mentioned the political climate. Yeah, we seem to not be able to get anything done. Although there was a bill, I believe it was HR 1280, that did get passed in the House, but of course it has to pass the Senate as well, and there it sits. I don't believe that they have even taken it up to talk about it or a vote since 2021. Why? I don't know. Do they feel that it's not important? When we see what happened in Memphis a few months ago, another unarmed black man killed, I should say, beaten by police and dying as a result of those beatings. Why no rush to get this done? We've seen, uh, well, I'll leave it right there. Let's talk about federal police reform. What is it that we want them to do? Karen?
What I would like for them to do is be able to do their job without always having the end result of murdering a person. There are some situations where there are laws on books in each state that the state legislators voted on, approved, that protect police officers. And one of the key phrases is resisting arrest. That particular phrase justifies the behavior in a lot of cases and places. So we need to start with the local police officers and work our way up to the federal. Because when we had the riot in January, was it last year, whatever, January 6th, and I'm in the DC area, I found out that where I live has no jurisdiction over government agencies. That's the Capitol Hill Police. So, and they, the, the DC police couldn't do anything without permission from the Capitol Hill Police. So we've got to put these two together. We've got to put everybody together across the board and not allow each state to have these little quirky laws implemented that protects police officers when they're wrong. Everybody has somebody that's rogue. Everyone has someone that misbehaves. Let's call these officers out, and if they have to go, let them go.
Yeah. And you mentioned the reform would allow them to do their job, but only within certain situations. For example, stop
Mm-hmm.
and frisk. They may say
Yeah.
that's their job, but that doesn't work. They proved that in New York City. Stop and frisk only ends up hurting more times than not the people that they stop, they profile, and they stop and they check. Okay, we shouldn't live in a country where you can just be frisked for no reason. As a black man myself from New York City, I've been thrown on several police cars, and the only thing I did was come out my apartment, walk down the block, and turn the corner. And by turning that corner, it's like all hell broke loose. As soon as I turned the corner, they were like all over me. And the crazy thing is, an Italian kid across the street from me, we came out of our homes the same time. He was on one side of the street, I'm on the other. We said hi to each other. We both walked up to the same corner. And it was like they were just waiting for me. because as soon as I got there, they were like all over me. And I looked as I'm against the car, I looked at over the street, across the street at him, and he was going on back his business. And I was like, damn, why me? What did I do? Why not him? So it's not just doing their job. And you mentioned um, uh, something, Karen, but another statement that they use often is, they feared for their lives.
Yes,
I
yes. But
remember in the case of Tyree Nichols a few uh, months ago, uh, although it hasn't come up because they haven't had the trial yet, but somebody did say he reached for my gun. And the
mhm.
video I saw, when you're beating and boom bashing someone, how the hell he's on the ground, how is he going to reach for your gun? You know, but
Well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'd like to clarify that when I say do their job, what I think there's a way to train them where everyone doesn't have to die, where you can disarm someone. What are you using? And we have the tasers. Even folks using tasers are killing people because the voltage is too high. So I mean, what happened? How did we get to the point, or have we always been here? And because people are video recording now, we're seeing more of it. Is this something that has always been going on with fatalities from being arrested by the police? Is this something that has always been going on, but we're just seeing more of it because people are video recording it? There's no reason for somebody who goes into a supermarket, mows down 100 people, and he's just arrested. There's no reason for somebody with an assault rifle who goes to a school and kills 45 kids and he's just arrested. But someone being arrested who has a gun on their hip, they're shot dead.
Mm,
How do you justify those?
very good point. And Karen, I'm sorry, not Karen, Charlie. Views on the need to reform police in the U.S. As of last year, was 50% of adults saying that major changes are needed. 39% said minor changes are needed, and 11% said no changes are needed. Black Americans, they were 72% um, saying that major changes were needed. White adults, 44%, and Hispanics, 54% to say that changes are needed. Why do you think there's the disparity between the percentages?
Well, it's probably because white people feel that in general they're treated right by the police. Uh, just going off of Karen's point here, let's be honest. Police brutality has always existed. It existed 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or whatever, and you can go into the history books and see examples of that on, yes, all races, if you go back in history. But it seems to be more on people of color now, and I don't have exact numbers on that. There's a number of things that can be looked at to solve this, solve it or hopefully make this problem less. One of the ideas I saw was that the idea that the database for police, so for instance, a cop does something wrong and is terminated from their position, and they go to another police department in another state or region of the country, that there is a database, a national database, so they can look up that individual on there to see his or her previous record on that. My understanding is that does not exist right now, and that should happen. I mean, we have the technology to do that sort of thing, and call records together. And we're talking about not just the government, the federal government. We're talking about the local police, state, and local, and so forth on that. I think that's something that can be done in some sort of network thing that could probably be coordinated by the government or law enforcement agencies or something like that, just as a start on that.
Okay,
I'll also say that some of you, I had another article I was reading about that. I'm listening to some of your numbers. I have a couple. I'll try to pull it up here if we have time. But some of the numbers were a tad different than what you were saying. But go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's always going to be different surveys, and depending on what the parameters are, you may find some disparity in the numbers. But what you just said, let's go back a little bit. I believe you said uh, that the 44% that I gave out as a number of white adults would feel that they are treated right by the police. But shouldn't it be about the reform if the police are doing something wrong, not doing something wrong to you?
Well, it should be, but it's not that way.
Hmm.
It's not that way. You're thinking about it. Well, hey, I got no problems with the cops, and everything's cool, But if you know, got involved in something, whether you were guilty or not about it, and then you're probably going to be more self-aware about the police on that.
And
I'll
there,
even go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and therein, I believe lies a big part of the problem.
Oh, sure.
If it's not happening to you, like screw it, right? It's
Yeah.
not happening to me, so I'm good.
And this is maybe not pertains to the subject so much, but somebody may notice on my Facebook page, I gave an example of that last week. I was involved in something I felt the need to contact the police about, which had to do, and I'm an Uber driver, and it had to do with a passenger on there. And that made me be more self-aware of that. That's not something I recall ever happened to me. Me calling the police on somebody, maybe somebody called on me, but I hope not. That was a long time ago. But there was a situation with an individual which I was not able to resolve, dealing with my work, and I just decided to call the local police department, and it was had to do with an individual who was intoxicated, and I felt that I ultimately could not handle it, so I called them up, and they came over and dealt with it. So, but my point being is that sort of thing made me more aware of that, because that's not something I would normally think of unless I was involved in the police in some way. Being I got trouble, or something, I was on the periphery of whatever was going on, or whatever. That's what I would think is going on there.
Okay, very good. And I did see your posting about that
Right.
as well. And yeah, I would just say, thank you for just being a good human being and just helping somebody. I mean, regardless, I don't know if the lady was, what race she was, what nationality, anything about her, but I do know you as a
Not
human
important.
being, you
Correct.
helped her. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Um, President Biden did sign a police reform bill. I believe it was last year. Yeah, last year, and it's very weak. Uh, it only applies to federal law enforcement, as Karen said, because those are the only people that's under the president's direct control. Now, it bans things like chokeholds, no knock warrants, and it mandates that all federal officers have body cameras. But then again, the only officials that Biden has the power to order around are the federal, and pretty much the states, the local municipalities are allowed to create their own laws and govern as they see fit. Um, and part of what Biden said when he signed it, and I'm trying to find that right now.
I actually have it in front of me.
He said, fund them, fund them, fund them with training. So give them the additional money they need for training, obviously. Um, and I wanted to shift the conversation with that phrase, fund them, fund them, fund them. We've all heard about people saying defund the police. I personally don't agree with that, but I'd like to ask Dan. Dan, what do you think about it?
Well, it also depends where the funding's going. I mean, we had here in Illinois, we just had a new law go into effect. I think it's called the Safety Act or something like that. That is looking for different ways to do policing. So if it's a mental health situation, to bring a social workers along to look at those kind of things. But it doesn't change the attitude. So obviously, the more recent incidents we've seen, these guys knew they were on camera and they still did it because they don't expect consequences. So while we're funding, we have to also do consequences. The Chicago Police Department's been under a consent decree for, I think, 20 years. And a recent study of it said they're not even close to complying. So we have to have enforcement on the enforcers. The interesting thing I was reading was apparently black officers as well as white officers also tend to arrest more black men. So obviously there's something endemic in the system that's doing that. We have a lot of history in this country with that, from the peonage system, everything. You go and you collect black men up to work and some for somebody and things like that. So there's something inherent in the system. We demand a lot of enforcement. We don't do a lot to solve the problems that create crime. So that's also part of it when you're talking about funding. And I think the people who were talking about defunding were looking for ways to do it differently. And it kind of got caught up in that rhetoric, and it goes back to what I said earlier, that the political situation now doesn't want, one side is using it and saying, well, you're unsafe, so we have to give police all sorts of new powers and military equipment and all these kind of things. And how can you say, there are a lot of good cops, but there are also a whole bunch of bad ones. And until we decide to have consequences and for those who are doing wrong, we're not going to fix it.
Well,
I know with my black friends that they have to tell their kids, they have to give them the talk that I didn't have to give my son. Because you, Calvin, like from the experience you just talked about, you have to have an awareness that I don't have to have. And that's wrong.
yeah.
And I'm not sure how we fix that, but that's one of the heart of the problems.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And, I was just thinking that I understand a bit where the president was coming from, but from the other side, when you think about from the black point of view, I'm going to just put it like that, okay? Black people in America know how this all works, okay? Black people agitate, they organize, they march, they sweat, they bleed, they get beat up for a thing. And then the elected officials, all they're worried about is how it's going to look on them. Will they be able to get elected again? Will the media be bad on them? And even when black people go out and they do that, organizing and marching and protesting, they still risk additional police brutality to protest police brutality. It's crazy. It's crazy. And what the president said 3 times was fund them, fund them, fund them with training. No really good explanation. We've explained it more about what kind of training they would have than he did. So when I added up, I heard 3 funds, fund them 3 times, and train them only 1 time, and no explanation on how to train them. And it really gets to a point after a while where you just don't trust anyone anymore. When you expect the people to have a champion or someone that's going to be in their corner, and they come out with just weak sugar water, and you want a real strong drink, and you get something that's weak and it's not really going to help anything. Um, you know, it makes you want to give up some time. So I'm going to ask our newest panelist, KG. Do you have anything to throw in on this conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. What when Biden says fund them, fund what exactly? And I'm wondering what kind of training are we funding? There, uh, earlier today, I watched a YouTube video about the difference between police officers who have a warrior philosophy and police officers who have a guardian philosophy. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, the debate between the warrior and guardian approach. A warrior police officer is one who will escalate, who will who's more worried about more focused on busting heads and stopping bad guys and coming out on top and dominating, while a guardian is about de-escalating and instead of causing fear, building trust with the community and negotiating instead of bringing out the weapons right away. So if we're really going to train police to be more effective, then we really need to train them to adopt the guardian philosophy and favor that over the warrior philosophy, which should only be used a minority of the time when the situation is very dire.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Yep.
I, thank you for using that word warrior, because I do know that a lot of a government agency that I work for, a lot of the recruits that they hired were former military people, and they were very aggressive, very aggressive. So I'm wondering if that particular training that they receive in the military, the fight to survive, is not good for policing. Like, how do you change the mindset of someone who's been in the military, who probably went to battle, and their thing was to survive, And how do you change that mindset when they come onto a police force? How do you monitor? I thought that when they did psychological exams to determine, to possibly select the best candidate who was stable enough to police the streets of whatever city that they're working for. So that's a great word. Thank you for using that.
Sure, and I think it's a great point that police officers are frequently recruiting veterans, but because they see the military training as almost like a shortcut. Oh, this person knows weapons. This person knows how to confront and take down people. They'll be easy to train. Then we don't have to spend as much training resources. This person is already done half the work, instead of having to retrain that person that they're no longer a soldier, that they are there to enforce the law and not to defeat an enemy, and they need to regard all people around them as people that they're there to serve and not as potential enemies.
That's true. That's true. So let's recap a little bit. When we talk about the videos that we've seen, publicly of police doing the wrong thing, we've seen white police officers killing blacks. We've seen black police officers killing blacks. Have we seen any black police officers killing whites yet? I can hear a pin drop.
It's a possibility, but it's just not making the news. because all races are being killed by the police.
Yeah.
And I say media coverage on certain situations don't generate mass media review, because it's happened. I mean, a lot of people who are out protesting police reform were all races, and some of the people experienced it. They were exposed to it. They had kids, husbands, wives, whatever, killed too. And I don't know. We because there was a woman. What was a woman from Hawaii who was shot by a police officer? He mistook her for an intruder. He was African American and he went to jail for a long time.
Okay.
So,
I don't actually recall that, and
mhm.
I definitely don't think it got that much media coverage.
It
But
did for a minute.
okay,
It did, but
okay,
because when his trial started, that's when they really expounded on what had happened again. And she had called them because she thought somebody was trying to break into her place. And when he responded, she apparently came out of nowhere and he mistook her for the intruder and he shot her and killed her.
okay.
So, and probably there wasn't, Calvin, it probably was not as much media coverage as other situations and scenarios have popped up.
Well, here's what I do know. I know that the most ardent police advocate or reform advocates, the loudest voices that calls for change, they have to acknowledge that without Congress, the president can't do anything. His ability to control the behavior of local police is going to be limited. Okay. And on our list of upcoming or suggestive topics, I put on there about uh, maybe a revisement, revisal, revising the Constitution or the constitutional system because it was created by and for. Come on, let's be truthful. It was for white men, and they have certain things carved out that allow for states at that time to maintain slavery at their discretion. Okay, so the police power goes to the states. President can't do crap without Congress, and the Senate has already shown us that they're not going to make a move. So basically, uh, there's no. I feel there's no loophole, or if there is one that Biden can take um, to make things better. So, where do we go from here? Anybody?
We need to lay on our local representatives.
Mm,
We need to hit them hard because a lot of people are in positions posturing and posing and pretending that they're concerned for their constituents. And there are things that you can do and things you can't do. But they don't, if when you go to the meetings, the community, your whatever, the community meetings where they show up, they talk a good game, a great game. They make you comfortable and feel like you're protected when in actuality you're not sometimes. So we need to start with them if they're not doing what needs to be done because they are the creators of a lot of the laws in these states that allow police officers to get away with the crimes of killing people and the brutality. They're the ones. It starts with them, you know. And the only reason I know this is because throughout some of the cases that have happened, the difference between first degree, second degree, and third degree is like what in each state. And these are things that they voted on. Somebody went and said, they lobbied, we need to implement this law to protect police officers. It might be the police association. I don't know, but we got to start right there. When we start right there and let people who are elected officials know that we need them to do better and be better, maybe some of them will be a little more honest about what they can and cannot do for society, especially when it comes to policing.
Okay. Charlie,
Yeah,
where
when
do we
there's
go?
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I was just going to say, where do we go from here?
I think there's a measurement coming up, and that's in the city of Chicago here. There's a fascinating mayoral election going on there right now. There was a primary, there were 9 candidates, great diversity in the candidates. The incumbent mayor was voted out, and now we're down to 2 people. One person who, yes, is white, probably takes a more traditional approach to law and order. The other candidate, who is a person of color, is taking an approach that we need to bring in more mental health professionals to deal with the stuff that the police are not qualified to deal with. And that if there are situations like that, those individuals need to be brought in to assist, to take over for that. That the police have to do too many different things. They have to be too many different things to too many different people. And he's also talking about bringing more detectives in on the other hand as well. So I think there's just a fascinating thing going on. The second person I mentioned, I thought when we had the first election, I said, this guy is going to be the sleeper candidate because he was running 4th or 5th or something, and he snuck in. He beat the incumbent and others, and he got in. And he's behind right now. He's got a ways to go, and he may catch up to the first guy. He may not, but I would say keep an eye on him.
Oh, I'm keeping an eye on him. You can't fool Mr. Gibbs.
Yes.
Let me tell you.
I mean, I don't live in Chicago, but it's very fascinating to watch what's going on there right now.
Well, let me tell you what I know about the second candidate, the second person, as you said.
Yes.
Early in his campaign, he was running, and this is before the election last week. He was saying about he wanted to defund the police. He said that several times. I have him on my DVR saying, I'm running on, I want to defund the police. As soon as somebody put into his mind, maybe that's not the best way to put it, he stopped saying that, hasn't said it since. Yes, he is the second horse in a two-horse race. But I just wonder, when someone says something and then they take it back, do we assume that they have changed their mind, or they still are thinking that but just not talking about it, or are they calling it something else now?
I think he did it because he knows he wants to win and he might have a chance to do it.
Well, don't lie. Don't lie to Mr. Gibbs. That's a no-no.
Well, we tend to, in this country, we don't let politicians change their minds, and I think sometimes we have to allow that to happen, and hopefully he learned something new. I would say elections matter, and one of the things that people forget is that the laws made by your state affect your day-to-day life more than any other entity, even more than the local and even more than the national. And most people don't even know who the representatives are in the state house. So think about that. We did get some change in Illinois. We'll see how it works out. They are trying some new things. But I think what we're really getting to at this point is a siege mentality. The police have a siege mentality against the communities. People live in different neighborhoods, have siege mentalities against each other and perceptions. And as listening to this discussion tonight, it really hit me that I think we're all kind of barricading ourselves from each other, and even in our minds. We have people who live in, communities that are walled off, literally walled off. And I think we're in a situation right now where the police have put themselves into a place where they feel like they're in a siege mentality against the community. And it goes back to what KG was saying with that warrior mentality. as opposed to trying to go out in the community and become part of it. And I think if we can find a way to fundamentally change that piece, we may be on our way for a solution.
Okay, very good. And yes, you can change your mind, and you are allowed to do that, but acknowledge that. Don't say one thing and then just cut to something else and don't acknowledge that you change it. KG, any final thoughts? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think Dan really said it best that the police ought to integrate themselves into the local communities more. I think even just seeing police drive by and in the police cars has it's kind of a well, I don't know if you I don't know if people in Black communities would feel the same way, but but it but in other communities, just seeing a police officer drive by in a police car can have a stabilizing effect if they're just driving by, you know. And if you see them every day, if you see police officers, you know, just uh, going about the day just like everybody else, that can have that just that just that quiet presence alone can build trust and reduce crime on its own. I Something that I've learned is that uh, various police departments throughout the nation they have this crime statistics database, and they use it to figure out where all the crimes are happening, and they use that to deploy police officers to the perceived hotspots that these computers pick up, and that seems logical. It seems like, you know, that's a logical way to deploy police and use police resources, but it may actually be having a negative effect. It may be encouraging too much of that warrior personality instead of the guardian personality. So while it's important to target crime, I think it may be more important to build general trust and a warm relationship between police and citizens.
Okay. Yeah, it does make a difference when you can get to know the police that's watching your area. I remember growing up, we did know a lot of the police in my community. If not by name, we knew the faces of most of them, even their nicknames. And for the most part, as far as that was concerned, I would say it did give a sense of well-being within the neighborhood. So, with that being said, we're going to take a little break right now, and when we return, we will have our round robin discussion, which will be led by one of the panelists, only on Diverse Talking Heads podcast. Stay tuned. are back. This is Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and welcome to our segment of this episode called our Round Table Discussion. Tonight, I will be the discussion leader, and since we just had a kind of a hot topic with police reform, I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to ask the panelists, what is your favorite ethnic comfort food? What is your favorite ethnic comfort food? And I see Charlie kind of looking at me kind of funny there. So,
You
Charlie,
said ethnic, right?
yeah,
Okay. Mhm.
yep,
Okay.
yep, I did. So I'm
Interesting.
going
All
to
right.
ask. So I'm going to ask Dan. Let's start with Dan.
Okay, I'd have to say hummus.
Mm,
I just love it, but I'm talking about the real stuff that's actually made by hand and not coming out of the grocery shelf, that somebody's actually made with the olive oil and fresh pita bread to scoop it up and to have. It's just very satisfying, and it's also a very social food
and
so that
that's
people around the
chickpeas, right?
table. What's
That's
that?
chick. That's chickpeas, right?
Mainly chickpeas, yeah. Some chickpeas usually has tahini in there, which is a sesame base, olive oil, garlic, whatever. There's various amount, but the real pure one, just for me, if I can just lap it up, that's good comfort food for me.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Karen,
Yes.
what is your favorite comfort food?
Italian.
Mm, okay.
Italian. Italian.
Anything in particular?
Oh, I like good pizza.
Mm,
I
okay.
love good pizza. I love good pasta dishes.
Okay.
Mm,
And
love them.
and of course, I know that you're in the Northeast and we're
Mm,
out here in the Midwest, and both regions claim to have the best pizza. But where would you say the best pizza you've had came from?
still New York.
All right.
I mean, I was truly taken aback by deep dish Chicago pizza. I did not expect it to taste as delicious as it did, but I that was deep dish. I like thin crust, minimal cheese, sauce. All of that other stuff that they put on pizzas is like a no for me. I'm the
Okay.
person, I just need mine plain. I might put anchovies on it or something, but no.
Okay.
I like a great pasta dish, fresh made, homemade pasta. Love it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Mhm.
Charlie.
Okay. I heard the question. You said ethnic. I thought you were referring to my ethnicity. And then when Karen said Italian, then I went, "Oh, wait a minute. I got to rethink this." Okay. I don't even have. You know what? I don't even have an answer for this, sir. Uh, I'll just say I like pizza. I worked in the pizza business back in the day, and ate way too many pizzas, and I had to stop for about 7 years afterwards because I was kind of pizzaed out. But I have gone back in recent years and eaten pizza, usually a supreme or something like that. No, I don't like anchovies. Um, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. And KJ. I'm sorry, KG. What's your favorite comfort food?
When you asked that question, the first thing that came to mind was tamales.
Mm,
Whenever I visit a Mexican restaurant for the first time, I check out their tamales and see how good they are. The best ones I've yet had are at a Mexican restaurant in Glendale Heights, where I used to live. It's the restaurant is called La Campana. It's a big Mexican restaurant, and their Tijuana tamales are still the best. And now I don't live there anymore. I live more than an hour away, but occasionally I do drive all the way there just to have those Tijuana tamales. And actually, the other night, I was at the supermarket and I found that they were selling frozen tamales, and I thought I'd try them, and I tried them, and they were disappointing. They just don't have that much flavor, uh, frozen tamales. So you've got to you gotta have you gotta have them homemade, I think.
All
Tamales
right.
are my my favorite comfort food.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I must admit, although I ate a lot, and I love Southern food, Southern cooking. You know, I grew up eating neck bones and collard greens and sweet potato pie. I love that stuff. I was raised on that. I now have a palate that I like to eat Cuban food, and I love West Indian food. I love jerk chicken, curry goat. Um, love that stuff. And last year, my wife and I happened to be in New Jersey, and we stopped by what I thought was like a little Cuban restaurant. And I had the like stewed chicken and rice, and they brought my own pot of chicken and rice to the table. Let me tell you, I ate until I was almost in a coma. I couldn't even drive the car to the back to the hotel. It was so good. It was so good, and there was leftovers, which I had, had them packaged up. And I know I didn't have a microwave or stove in the room, but I did. We did pass a homeless person on the street, and I gave it to them to eat, and I hope they enjoyed it as well. So yeah, I just wanted to change things up a little bit, find out. They say that food and sports and music always bring people together. I wanted to see what kind of food you guys like and share mine as well. And as far as this segment goes, I do want to leave one final thought. The reality of policing in America is that most of it happens at the state and the local level. Now, I'm not particularly worried about being pulled over by the FBI for driving while black because I'm neither a multi-state serial killer and I'm not going to be mistaken for one, obviously. I'm not particularly worried about the DOJ's coming knocking down my door with search warrants, as I'm not in a cult. I'm not in a cult religious leader in Texas. I'm just a black man who doesn't want to be murdered in broad daylight for a moving violation. With that being said, I do want to thank our guest panelists. KG, thank you for being here. I want to thank all of our listeners for checking out this episode, and of course, our regular panelists, Dan, Charlie, Karen. Great job. And that's about all, y'all, for this episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and it's always important that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here. Until the next episode of Diverse Talking Head podcast, exit stage left.